The presidential primary races in both parties took significant turns this week. After a sweep of 5 Northeast states, Donald Trump turned his attention to Hillary Clinton, saying that she is playing the woman card, and if she were a man, she wouldn't get more than 5% of the vote. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz named Carly Fiorina as his running mate, despite his distant second-place status. Patty, it kind of feels like I used the Onion as a source this week, but I didn't. This is actual real life and real news. Take your pick from all these crazy things that happened this week.
Well, and it got crazier. I was in a New York hotel room watching CNN where they replayed and replayed and replayed, because it's a money-saving operation, the Donald Trump sound clip when they asked him to explain how she was using the woman card, which should be fairly easy. Like, she's a woman. She has people supporting her who say you've got to vote for a woman. That doesn't mean you shouldn't vote for a woman, but he could not explain himself. And if he can't explain this, I don't know what he can explain. For a good example of using the woman card, you only had to stay tuned to the TV station for another couple hours when all of a sudden Cruz really did use the woman card when he pulled out Carly Fiorina as his vice presidential running mate, which is not going to save his campaign. That took more weird twists. Now we have the devil, everyone who equated him with the devil later this week. And that really excellent quote from Tim Kaine, who just said, I think, Lucifer is doing it. You did a disservice to Lucifer comparing him to Cruz. Was it Boehner? Oh, Boehner. Boehner compared him to the devil. Tim Kaine said you did the devil a disservice.
I see. But either way, not exactly Ted Cruz's finest hour, especially
Major
mucking up the Hoosiers thing in Indiana. It's that's hard to really recover from. David, is the move by Ted Cruz to name Carly Fiorina VP candidate this far away from a convention that he's in distant second place too little, too late?
No, I think it's you play with the cards you have on any given hand, and under the circumstances, it was a wise move. But instead of talking about Donald Trump's latest verbal thing, I'd like to put it in perspective. If it's a Trump-Clinton race, it'll be the first time in the history of public opinion polling when both major party candidates are disliked, and for excellent reasons, by majorities of the electorate. In my view, never since the first presidential election have we had let's say they were the candidates, would you have a pair like that who are both so obviously unfit for any position of public trust? Put aside their policies. It's their evil, loathsome characters that make them fit for any position in a republic. And it's a sign of the degeneration of this country as we become more and more like either the Weimar Republic or, more precisely, the closing decades of the Roman Republic before it turned into a dictatorship because of the decline of the public's civic virtue, that both major parties could nominate people who, as everyone can tell, are highly corrupt and lie as easily as they breathe. Both of them are fierce enemies of the First Amendment and have made no bones about that. And I can't predict all of the lies that either of them would tell as president, but I can guarantee you what the first lie will be, which will be the moment they take the oath and they say, I will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. To the contrary, they are both enemies of our constitutional republic.
Eric, it's probably hard to hear David sugarcoat it like that, not really take a stand. I've heard more people voice opinions like David just iterated, and what I'm wondering and asking you is, now that we're closer to, I think, people maybe accepting, but the reality of that it's going to be Trump-Clinton, do you think more Republicans are going to be held, their feet held to the fire by what Trump is saying because he's going to be top of their ticket?
Yeah, I mean, to David's point, I sometimes disagree with David. I might express that viewpoint in this case in a slightly less caffeinated way, but I don't fundamentally disagree with David's point. Peggy Noonan had a terrific column recently on what this country is waking up to, that the two of them are going to be our standard bearers. I flash back 8 years ago in the McCain-Obama race, and there was a great editorial in The Economist basically saying no matter if you're cheering for one side or the other, you can't argue that these are two fine men, that these are some of the best of what the country has to put forward, and no one can look at Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and say, this is out of 310 million Americans, this is the best this country has to offer. That's a very sad commentary. Of course, Republicans from dog catcher to Congress to state legislative candidates are panicked beyond words at the thought of Donald Trump being at the top of the ticket and what that might mean. We're going to talk about the Colorado Senate race in a minute, but the fundamental issue in the Colorado Senate race on the Republican side is it a nomination worth having to run against Michael Bennet? And with Trump at the top of the ticket, Bennett's a tough incumbent to begin with Trump at the top of the ticket. Who knows if it's a nomination worth having? It strikes me that Republicans at the moment, I think the whole process with Donald Trump has been akin to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, I don't know if you remember her treatise years ago, the 5 stages of dying, the 5 stages of grief, and you start with denial, and then you go to bargaining, and I can't remember all 5 stages, and the final stage is ultimate acceptance, and that's where it strikes me most Republicans are. They're grieving that Donald Trump is going to be their nominee, but they're starting to accept the fact that that's the way the cards are being dealt, and there isn't really an out.
Kristen, with your time on Capitol Hill, what kind of reaction are you seeing from lawmakers from both sides of the aisle?
Well, I like state legislatures because everything happening nationally always plays out in a state legislature, and we're definitely seeing that here. There is some serious gnashing over how to change our presidential nomination process. I think, to everyone's point, I agree with everyone. Both parties are going to take a serious long look about how they nominate candidates, what you have to do to become the nominee, and whether that they are putting forward the best candidates in November. So you're definitely seeing smaller versions of that debate here, both in the U.S. Senate race here and both in like little piddly county commissioner races about how do we nominate people. Is it only the insiders? There's a lot of backlash in both parties against presumed elites or the moneyed interests, but both parties don't really have great ideas for how to move past that.